What if I told you that the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed into law a couple of months ago contains some horrible legislation? After all, it was a bipartisan effort, and there's only a few kinds of things that you can get both sides of the controlled opposition that we call political parties to agree on. That is something that screws over the American people, something that allows these politicians to line their pockets, or something that does both. One of the worst provisions that I've seen included in this bill is the requirement for car manufacturers to include a kill switch in new motor vehicles. That's right. As part of the infrastructure bill, the government is requiring the ability to be able to remotely disable your car whenever they feel the need to. But don't just take my word for it. Let's actually read what is included here in the bill, or the law rather, because it's been passed into law. So the relevant section that we're going to take a look at is section 24220, the Advanced Impaired Driving Technology. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at what that says. Okay, so findings that Congress has found. So the first parts of this are just telling us how bad drunk driving is and the reason why Congress feels the need to do something about it. So alcohol-impaired driving fatalities represent approximately 1/3 of all highway fatalities in the United States. In 2019, there were 10,142 alcohol-impaired driving fatalities in the United States involving drivers with a blood alcohol concentration level of 0.08 or higher. The estimated economic cost for alcohol-impaired driving in 2010 was over $44 billion. So obviously that's including things like loss of life and harm to pedestrians, motorists, etc., but also the damage to infrastructure and the damage to property. So pretty big deal. And then included, according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology can prevent more than 9,400 alcohol-impaired driving fatalities annually. And to ensure the prevention of alcohol-impaired driving fatalities, this advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology must be standard equipment in all new passenger motor vehicles. And in this case, new, I don't think that they mention it here in this specific section, but there's many different provisions included in this bill that are supposed to be taking place by the year 2026, and this is one of them. So new cars starting in 2026 are going to have this technology. And so here is where they define how this equipment is supposed to work. And they don't really get into a whole lot of detail about it either, which is also pretty scary. So the technology means a system that can passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle to accurately identify whether that driver may be impaired and prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if an impairment is detected. So it needs to be able to not only do this remotely whenever law enforcement wants to trigger it or something like that, but it's also something that's going to happen automatically. It can passively and accurately detect whether the BAC of a driver of a motor vehicle is equal to or greater than the BAC described in section blah, blah, blah. Basically, if you're, I think 0.08 is standard across the whole United States at this point. So if you're in excess of that. Prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if the BAC is above the legal limit is detected, or if a combination of systems described in subparagraphs A and B. So the proposal that's being made to legislatures about this is that the vehicle kill switch is necessary to stop drunk drivers before they're able to harm somebody or to damage any property. And I'd also imagine that there's going to be arguments made to be able to turn off the vehicle of somebody who is running from the police, possibly to avoid being arrested on felony warrants, because in those situations, you often have the suspect doing things like running red lights, driving on the shoulder, driving in the wrong lane, and more often than not, this does lead to property damage and harm to pedestrians and other motorists. All of these sound like good things in theory, but in practice, law enforcement has shown time and time again that they will abuse the power that they have over law-abiding citizens. The CIA, for example, they've already used and abused the ability to remotely hack cars for years now. They've even gone so far as to use this to murder Michael Hastings, an American journalist that worked closely with WikiLeaks. Their solution to stop his publications was to hack his Mercedes, kill the brakes, and then make it accelerate into a tree. How many more incidents like this are going to take place once these remote monitors and kill switches become the standard in 2026? But it gets even worse than that. You see, the wording of this law is so vague. All we really know is that some kind of monitoring tool will be in your vehicle, and presumably it needs to get some kind of baseline of your driving ability or just the style of how you drive, I guess, to be able to recognize your driving habits, because not everyone drives the same. There's a lot of subtle details like maybe how you brake or how you turn that could very easily vary from person to person, and especially from city to city. So what happens if I let somebody else drive my car? Or what happens if I take my car to Atlanta? The way that people drive in Atlanta is very different than the way that people drive in Boston. So is the difference between how I drive versus somebody else driving my car, is that going to be enough to trigger the engine kill function? Or what about the way that I drive in Atlanta versus the way that I drive in Boston? Is that going to be enough to kill the engine of my car when I'm in the middle of the road? Or what if I go off-road with my vehicle? Not in the sense of a crash, like in a legitimate sense. To the computer system that's monitoring my driving and comparing it to the baseline, the way that I drive off-road might seem very similar to how somebody would drive drunk. So what are people like farmers or hunters or even people that just go off-road for leisure, what are they supposed to do when they're going between driving on roads and off roads several times in a day? Are you going to have to go to the DMV to get a temporary suspension on your digital backseat driver so that you don't end up getting sent into a ravine? What about when you swerve on the road to avoid a crash or to avoid some kind of obstacle that's in the road? Somebody else might be driving and not paying attention, or maybe a deer runs into the road, or there's some trash that you're trying to avoid. Your car system goes off like, oh, that looks like a Bucati swerve to me. I'm going to go ahead and disable your engine now, and then it causes a pileup in the middle of the road. But hang on, things get even worse. Remember, law enforcement has a backdoor to this kill switch, in addition to it running automatically. Once a certain threshold is met, that seems to be able to detect if you're driving drunk. Now, if law enforcement can remotely hack your car, then so can black hat hackers. And since it's up to the manufacturer of each different kind of car to install this, there probably isn't going to be a universal security standard on them. Some manufacturers might do it in a way that's pretty difficult to compromise. And then others are going to make the remote admin password admin123. We may very soon find ourselves in a society where hacker hitmen are not only possible, but common. I mean, think about it. There's already hitman services on the dark web. Granted, 99.9%, if not 100% of them are fake, because it turns out that assassinating someone and getting away with it is actually pretty difficult. It's much easier to just steal somebody's Bitcoin, $5,000 worth or however much they charge for a fake hitman service. But with the possibility of remote hacking cars, all that a hacker really needs is a license plate and maybe a cell phone or an even smaller device to actually conduct the hack, and then they could just kill someone's engine in the middle of an intersection as a semi-truck is coming. Or they might even be able to just sell basically these kill switches that are so easy an idiot can operate them. So you can just have people who want to kill somebody themselves. I don't know, maybe a jealous ex-girlfriend or something like that, where all you need is maybe the license plate or the VIN number of the car, you punch it in, and then wherever they are, it just remotely disables that vehicle. Or if a switch is connected to the engine in some way that it's able to take it off, then there may be a way to instead cause it to accelerate into a tree, just like how the CIA killed Michael Hastings. The possibilities are endless, but all of them are horrible in the cyberpunk dystopia that is modern America.